I think there are two most important drivers of a change in the Western world and the journalists in the Western world, and the one is what we call in general commercialization, so to say the logic, that the market logic is overall dominating the journalistic production. And the second driver is the digitization, so the fact that new media and all what is happening in online communication is changing the journalism profession as well. These two, I would say, are the major drivers of a change.
It's changing because of two interlinked trends. I would call these trends technology and globalization. Journalism cultures are changing because of the internet. New actors have access to the public sphere, new actors have access to journalism. That's why the traditional journalists have to change. And globalization is important because even journalists in Pakistan, Myanmar or Russia, of course, know about global journalism cultures and have got a new orientation frame. The new orientation frame is the global journalism cultures, is a global journalism culture, and journalists all over the world have to adapt to this new orientation frame.
I guess today there is a global shift in journalism, a global transformation of journalism because of the internet, of course, and because of new patterns of media use. And journalists have no more prerogative to just producing facts. And I think there is also in the Western world a shift to more interpretation, to more opinion-based journalism, or to orientational function of journalism. And as Thomas Hanisch also put it today, that journalism becomes more like have more service functions and orientational functions in the world. So I think that is what is changing. And for example, this famous model, Anglo-Saxon model of separation facts and opinions, in my opinion, it doesn't really work nowadays also in the West, in some Western countries.
For me, it's quite difficult to describe the situation in the whole Western world. I could depict some peculiarities and some similarities and differences and changes on the basis of our empirical study, Journalism and Change, Journalistic Cultures in Russia, Poland and Sweden. This project realized in 2012-2013. And according to our data, we could see that such aspects of journalistic profession is changing as technology of getting information and work of everyday work of journalists. Also the perception of role which journalists realize in their everyday practices. And I think they're the main directions of the change of the development of journalistic cultures.
There are several factors that, to my viewpoint, influence today's development of journalism in the Western world in particular. There are big trends, for example, they have been mentioned throughout the conference several times. It's commercialization, so the driving of media by commercial logic. Also, it is digitalization, of course, getting new platforms of dissemination of information. And there are some smaller factors, but I also would like to mention another factor that wasn't mentioned on the conference. It is the migration flows and the fragmentation of societies, of which we spoke a bit, but also we need to consider this fragmentation in terms of how nation states are fragmenting today. So the borders are melting, they're blurring, and I think if we consider that internet is very much sort of, on the rise, it is developing in China, in India, in Africa, in Arab countries, maybe in 5 years we will get media online which are Western, but the audience for it will be Indian or Chinese or Arab. How it's going to change the Western media, I'm not yet sure. There are several scenarios, and the preferred scenario is that actually there will be global audience, that will be using this global media, and the Western media will be this global media. I think this is one of the lines that will be there for several years.
Journalism culture is changing in terms of technology, in terms of journalists using technology, but also in terms of technology impacting on journalism and the way it works. Technology is being used as a tool for acquiring information. Journalists are increasingly using social media to get more information, to gather data, but social media is also used to disseminate information. And so this is certainly one aspect. Second of all, I see that journalism is increasingly depending on the economic context. There are increasing demands on journalists, not only to deliver news, but also deliver profit. And thirdly, and as a consequence, there is a certain transformation of journalistic labor. Journalists are increasingly working as freelancers, whereas they used to work as employees many years back. So journalists are more becoming entrepreneurs. They have to take care of their careers, their work on their own, and not typically or always employed by newsrooms.
There's a cleavage, I would say, which was not that strong before, and the cleavage between those journalists who are well off, who became sort of star journalists, earn very good money, dominate the media discourse. And on the other hand, the huge amount of journalists in the local, in the regional media who have a lot more work to do by cross-media production, so to go on not only for print or audiovisual media, but to do the online production as well, but with less staff. Because of this, what I call commercialization or market logic, it is evident that the shareholders of the media companies want to get much more of money out of them, and so the cost cutting has become a huge problem. So we can't talk about a general trend, but sort of this cleavage that there is some who are well off and are able as well to do very qualitative high journalism, but as well many who try to do, but who have not the means or the working conditions to contribute to the public discourse by journalism as they would like to do.
In many ways, the most important point may be that the audience got much more importance than it had before. Now, the people, they don't just they don't have to look to the media or to read newspapers. They can produce content on their own via Facebook, via blogs, and so on. So this is one very important difference to the journalism as it has been before. Another one is that in former times there was print, there was TV, there was broadcast or radio. Now journalists have to think on all these media together. Cross-media journalism is a task of the day. It's online as a platform where all these things come together.
I have to say that compared to the United States, the German press is doing pretty well. We still have high circulation newspapers, and the television is also doing well, and we have a lively and vibrant online media scene. But, well, we can feel this transformation rather slowly, but it's there. The data indicates that journalists in Germany have been better off about 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so the conditions of working in journalism in Germany have been changing.
First of all, there are a lot of new journalists that entered the field. So before they were basically, let's say, journalists that were maybe trained by governmental institutions, and now bloggers or political activists entered the profession. So let's say the journalism culture has like much more diversity, I'd say, in these countries. This is one point. Another point is that, of course, also the role perception changed. So journalists are today much more critical towards governmental
or official reports or opinions, because the, let's say, upheaval situation led to a really more critical attitude. I think this is also one of the fundamental changes.
Russia has an interesting mix of journalism cultures. It has, interestingly, as Yelena Vartanova puts it, even roots, culture rooted in Tsarist Russia, in like pre-revolutionary Russia, then Soviet patterns of journalism culture, but also this new Western model. And it is interestingly how they mix up in Russia. And in my opinion, there is like, in the fragmented Russian society, there is like different journalism cultures with predominance of these patterns, of Soviet pattern and of the Western pattern of journalism, and of European continental tradition that in Russia is deeply rooted in journalism, actually, European continental tradition.
In countries like India or even China or Brazil, you know, the big population countries where media for a very long time were mostly state controlled. For example, in India, television news was monopoly of the state until 1991. Today there are something in the range of 200 plus news channels, because marketization has revolutionized broadcasting across the country. It's a huge population, and so marketization in that sense has actually created massive growth in the media industry. Similarly, in China, there has been a massive expansion of news outlets, of radio, or television, regional newspapers across the country. So in some countries, actually, this marketization is seen by many as a positive development. It has freed the news, as it were, from the control of the state apparatus, especially in a country like China, where it was, to a large extent, still state is very important, but market has also opened up possibilities for journalists to produce content which will sell in the marketplace, and that has led to massive expansion of news media.
I do not know Russian culture so well that I can dare to say something about it. But what is obvious is, and what we discussed on the conference as well, is that it is no longer very helpful to think about journalism only in this sense of national containers, to say West, East, Russia, Germany, because the differences are so big that you do not get the right picture out of it. So what I learned today during the conference as well is, yes, there are state media which are quite restrictive on what is freedom on information, but on the other hand there is as well a very vibrant sector of independent regional newspaper. So what could I dare to say? Is media are free or not free here, or journalism are doing like this? I think as well these drivers, or these motors, what I call them, to that the commercialization, digitization, perhaps here questions of political influence are as well the strong drivers who make journalism a not clear-cut picture, but very many different strands of developments.
I would like to name two differences. The first and most important difference is the financing. In Western journalism cultures is more money from advertisers, and so journalism can be more autonomous. With big financial sources you can work in a different way than if you would have to ask for money all day. And Eastern Europe and even other countries in the Arab world or in Asia, they have less money and more problems because businessmen, politicians, warlords try to influence, try to finance journalism, and so this is the first difference. And the second difference is, I would call it tradition. In the Western world, there is a long tradition of media freedom. Every young girl like you who wants to become a journalist knows about this tradition. And this is a difference to Eastern European journalism cultures and to African, Asian, and so on journalism cultures.
I think there's different standard of journalism, and we haven't had this very particular orientation to long-term survival of media on the open market. This is why the standard that has formed is a bit different. We don't think of this long-term perspective of survival, so we don't think of forming, we didn't used to think of this long-term survival of media, long-term trust, so to say. This is how the Western standard formed. Our media in the 90s, in the beginning of the years 2000, have tried to adopt these standards, but of course it had some difficulties. And we're still struggling in between this Anglo-Saxon, European models and our home Russian model. So we are somewhere in between now. And this is the main difference, how we understand what information is, what is allowed or not, how sources should be treated, and how facts and comments and opinions should be published. So this is the main difference, because everyday practices in editorial offices are more or less the same, to my viewpoint, but the standard that is in heads, in minds, is still a bit different.
Well, I'm not an expert on journalism culture in Russia. In general terms, as far as I know, there is less of a dependence of journalistic work on the political field. The dependence on certain interests of certain owners is probably not that strong in Germany as it is in Russia. It's also more safe to be a journalist in Germany than it is in Russia. There are examples. But in general terms, in terms of the values that journalists exercise and embrace, journalism in Germany is, after all, still fairly similar to journalism in Russia.
Difficult question, because West has different types of West. So there's a European journalism culture. There is an American culture which is much more market-led. Europe has still a tradition of public service media. In Germany, in Scandinavia, in Britain, in France. So the journalistic culture is slightly different. Similarly, in the East, there's a huge variety. So in China, even today, despite marketization of parts of Chinese media industry, the state is very important. State controls the media. In India, state is there, but not that strong. Market is much, more prominent. And again, it's this question of, political systems. India is a democracy, and in a democracy there is a plurality of opinion expressed and accepted. China is a one-party state. So the terms of debates are actually quite narrowly focused. So, again, Japan is a different case, Korea is a different case. I think it's unfair to kind of have a very broad generalization, East and West. When we're talking of a country of the size of China or India, you have to kind of go down a stage further and look at country-specific cases. And I would say, I think the common element that you would see across journalistic cultures is this pressure of the market. I think that's across the world. And that is impacting on the kinds of stories people cover. For example, there's a great deal of interest in celebrity culture, in kind of infotainment, news becoming an entertaining commodity. And that you see in various forms in many, many countries. Doesn't matter whether it's East or West or South or North, it's happening across the world.
Oh, it was very, very rich. Perhaps even too rich. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in it which needs to be discussed. And the most important thing is, I think, that it is very valuable and useful and helpful for everybody to be here, to have this exchange over borders to see what we have in common and what is separating, or where we have to need to develop new questions and even more than new answers. So meeting was wonderful.
Yeah, I'm really happy because it's always interesting to exchange ideas with colleagues that work on similar topics. So yeah, I appreciate it very much. It was really interesting. I gained a lot of new insights. So I really liked it, yeah.
It was a great pleasure to be here. It is always very interesting to meet people from other journalism cultures, to meet people from Russia, of course, but also from England and from other states.
I have really great impressions. We had really great guests, and we are really thankful to all of them that came from all over Europe, and from Western Europe, from Eastern Europe. We have really broad, wide geography of our conference, and I had a really big input for myself, so to reflect upon. And I think we are looking forward already for the next conference next year in comparative media studies at St. Petersburg State University.
It's very fruitful, very friendly, and very useful, I think, because we have new contacts. We have our impressions refreshed, and we have another view of our own data and our own results, because we have new questions posed during our papers and podium discussion. And I think such an opportunity is great if we would like to develop our comparative research activity.
It's a stimulating discussion. It's a nice encounter of people from different nations and different societies, all of them being interested in journalism and sharing interests in investigating the profession. So I have a very nice impression from the first half of the day, because that was just the beginning sessions, so there are going to be more of them. But so far, as I can tell, it's a very nicely organized and lively and lovely conference.